Okay. Okay, then allow me to start first. This continuation of the introduction to Ajahn Chah's book, Food for the Heart. So now it talks about the forest tradition. In a way, the forest meditation tradition predates even the Buddha. Before his time in India and the Himalayan region, it was not uncommon for those who sought spiritual liberation to leave the life of the town and village and resort to the mountains and forest wilderness. As a gesture of leaving worldly values behind it, made perfect sense. The forest was a wild and natural place, and the only people who were to be found there were the criminal, the insane, the outcast, and the renunciant religious seekers. It was a sphere outside the influence of materialistic cultural norms and thus ideal for the cultivation of the aspects of the spirit that transcended them. When the Bodhisattva left the life of the palace at the age of 29, it was to move into the forest and to train in the yogic disciplines that were available in his time. Their story is well known, how he became dissatisfied with the teachings of his first instructors and left them to find his own way. He did so, discovering that primal chord of truth he named the middle way under the shade of the Bodhi tree, beside the river Neranjara, in what is now Bodh Gaya in Bihar state, India. Okay, I think I'll pass the mic on. Sister Shome, you want to continue with the next two paragraphs?
It is frequently stated that the Buddha was born in a forest, was enlightened in a forest, lived and taught his whole life in a forest, and finally passed away in a forest. When choice was possible, the forest was the environment he opted to live in, since, as he would say, Tathagatas delight in secluded places. The lineage now known as the Thai forest tradition tries to live in the spirit of the way espoused by the Buddha himself and to practice according to the same standards he encouraged during his lifetime. It is a branch of the Southern school of Buddhism, more commonly referred to as Theravada. As far as the sketchy historicals can tell us, a few months after the Buddha's final passing away, a great council of elders was held to formalize and establish the teachings, the discourses, and the monastic rules in a standardized form of the vernacular called Pali Bhasa, the language of the text. The Dharma teachings formulated in this way over the next 100 years form the core of the Pali canon, the common basis of a range of subsequent Buddhist schools. 100 years later, they had a second council again to go over all the teachings in an attempt to keep everyone in accord. However, as it transpired, it was at this time that the first major split in the Sangha occurred. The larger portion of the Sangha wanted to change some of the rules, including allowing the monastics to use money.
Thank you, Sister Shome. Sister Aikim, would you like to read next? Thank you.
The smaller group was cautious about these proposed changes. Rather, they felt, well, whether it makes sense or not, we want to do things the way the Buddha and his original disciples did. Those of the small group were known as the Staviras in Sanskrit or Teras in Pali, meaning elders. After about another 130 years, gave rise to the Theravada school. Theravada literally means the way of the elders, and that has been their abiding theme ever since. The ethos of the traditions can be characterized as something like, for better or worse, that's the way the Buddha established it, so that is the way we'll do it. It has thus always had a particular conservative quality to it. As with all religious traditions and human institutions, over time, a number of branches sprouted from the Buddha's rootstock. It is said that by about 250 years after the Buddha's time, during the reign of the Emperor Asoka in India, there were up to 18, maybe more, schools of lineage with diverging views of the Buddha Sasana, the Buddha's dispensation. One lineage became established in Sri Lanka, somewhat at the remove from the cultural ferment of India, where a Brahminical revival and religious influences from West and East, all added to the stirrings of new forms of Buddhist thought. This lineage developed in its own way with less varied input and stimulation. It formulated its commentaries and interpretations of the Pali scriptures with a view not to developing new forms to meet the challenges of new faiths, but to adding details to the Pali text. Some of these were of the nature of fables to catch the hearts of ordinary folk. Some were more philosophical and metaphysical with a scholarly appeal. Out of all this, Theravada Buddhism crystallized, and despite wars, famines, and other cultural upheavals on the Indian subcontinent, the Theravadins have survived to the present day, largely because of the originally having become well established on the island of Sri Lanka, a safer haven than many others. Other Buddhist schools operated there. However, Theravada Buddhism was continually restored and maintained as the main religion of the island. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Aikim. So we can see how now that Theravada Buddhism, is sort of like the main tradition that is very similar to the Buddha's teaching, the early Buddha's teaching. Yeah. So some of them still do the alms round, and some very strict venerables still don't hold money, Yeah. Okay, let's carry on. Brother Waken, you want to continue? Thank you. From here, the lineage.
The yes, the lineage eventually spread throughout Southeast Asia, as at different times missionaries were invited from Sri Lanka and India. They went out to Burma and later on to Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. Later, from these countries to the West. Throughout this period of geographical dispersion of the Theravada tradition, the theme of a continual looking back to the standards of the Pali canon has been sustained. When being established in new countries, there has always been a strong sense of respectfulness and reverence for the original teachings, and also a respect for the style of life as embodied by the Buddha and the original Sangha, the forest dwelling monastics of the earliest times. This is the model that was employed then and has thus been carried on. Obviously, in these many centuries, there have been many ups and downs, but this pattern is what has been sustained. Sometimes the religion would die down in Sri Lanka, and then some monks would come from Thailand to lift it up again. Then it would fade out in Thailand, and some monks from Burma would boost it up, supporting each other over the centuries. Thus, the religion has managed to keep itself afloat and still largely in its original form.
Thank you. Sister Billy, would you like to continue next?
Yeah, thanks. Another aspect of these cycles along with degeneration, was the problem of success. Often, when the religion became well developed, the monasteries would get rich. The whole system would then become obese and corrupted and begin to collapse under its own weight. Then a splinter group would say, let's go back to basics, go off into the forest, and would again return to those original standards of keeping the monastic rules, practicing meditation, and studying the original teachings. It is significant to note that this cycle of progress, overinflation, corruption, and reform has taken place many times in many other Buddhist countries over the ages as well. It is striking how the lives and practices of such luminaries as Venerable Patrol Rinpoche in Tibet and Venerable Master Xing Yun in Venerable Master Shu Yun in China, both of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, are totally in accord with the spirit of the forest tradition. Both of these great masters chose to live lives of great simplicity, kept the monastic discipline very strictly, were accomplished meditators and highly gifted teachers. They largely avoided the burdens of rank and official responsibility, but invariably came to positions of great influence through the sure power of their wisdom and virtue. This is exactly the pattern of life as exemplified by the great forest Ajahns of Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Billy. The Venerable Master is Xu Yun Lao和尚. Yeah, is I think from the Chan tradition. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Sister Choi Kwan.
By the mid-19th century, Buddhism in Thailand had a rich variety of regional traditions and practices, but the general field of spiritual life had become somewhat corrupt, with lax monastic discipline. Dharma teachings mixed up with confused vestiges of Tantra and animism, plus the fact that hardly anyone practiced meditation anymore. In addition to this, and perhaps most significantly, the orthodox position held by scholars, not just by lax, unlearned, or confused monks, was that it was not possible to realize Nibbana in this age, or, in fact, even to attain jhana, meditative absorption. This was something that the revivers of the forest tradition refused to accept. It was also one of the reasons for which they were deemed mavericks and troublemakers by the ecclesiastical hierarchy of the time, and it lies behind the obvious disdain many of them, Ajahn Chah included, had for the majority of study monks of their own Theravada lineage, as well as their refrain that you don't get wisdom from books. It is necessary to elaborate on this point. Otherwise, the reader may wonder why Ajahn Chah is somewhat down on study, especially as Theravada is supposed to have great reverence for the word of the Buddha. It is a crucial point that delineates the Thai forest monastics, the determination to focus on lifestyle and on personal experience as opposed to books, especially the commentaries. One might find such sentiment presumptuous or arrogant, or seeming to be expressing the jealousy of an unlearned mind for its better, unless it is understood that the interpretation of scholars were leading Buddhism into a black hole. In short, It was just the kind of situation that made the spiritual landscape ripe for renewal. And it was out of this fertile ground that the revival of the forest tradition emerged. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Choi Kwan. So we can see that Ajahn Chah is, he doesn't really study a lot, teach a lot, he is more down to like meditation, and then to whoever students that have problem, he will, spontaneously from there just put the teaching of impermanence, non-self, very direct, right? We have seen some of his video. He will actually, like some Zen master, don't give you the answer. You come with the question, he will tell you to go and reflect on it, and then you are supposed to go and solve your own sort of like problem, but through meditation. So there's a lot of emphasis of calming our mind. So according to the Buddha is, 戒定慧, in order to gain wisdom. He's also like very strict in all the precept keeping, and also about meditation, this mindfulness, so that we can, develop wisdom. Yeah, and we can see just now from the introduction, there's all this corruption coming in. So, Buddha is so smart, because when it comes to money, when you touch money, when you have greed and craving for all these sensual pleasures, then that is where the problem all starts. And then you will have, very big monasteries, very big Buddha, and then, but the people there don't practice, looking at our own suffering, don't do meditation. So it will turn out to be like some of the monastery now, even, just do chanting, 赶经忏, and then, prayers for the dead, more on all these rituals, rituals and some blessings, all this 灌顶, all this blessing, all these merits. But we can see that this Thai forest tradition tries to follow what in Buddha's time, the very early, so that's why they're called the elders, the very strict in their precept keeping, and then follows the Buddha's footstep. Actually, we should do that lah. Because Buddha, how he gained enlightenment, we have to follow his footstep, 就是行佛所行才能悟佛所悟. If we don't follow his footstep, then we will be deviating from the mainstream of his teaching. So actually, we are very fortunate. Yeah. Even after 2,500 years, we should still have the opportunity to learn the true Dharma, the very, very, like those Ajahn Jing, very agamas, very near to the early Buddhism time. Then we can know actually what is Buddha's emphasis on. It's looking at our 5 aggregates, looking at our 6 sense base in contact to the external world, and how we can, eliminate suffering and get nirvana. Actually, you can. We can. It's just that we are so attached, right? We are so blinded by all this ignorance, actually. We don't see the truth. Yeah, we don't realize that the nature of things is they arise and cease, just like the 金刚经 say, 如梦幻泡影, just like a dream, just like a bubble, just like shadow, and then but we cling on to it as so firmly that this is me, this is mine, this is myself, and that's why we are still in this samsara. Yeah, unable to let go. Okay, is there any other comments from brothers and sisters?
I think you should ordain.
Huh? I should ordain. Quick, I still have my parents to look after. Yeah, so yeah, still haven't really able to let go. But I think what I shared with you all before, my resolution is to practice, yeah, still put into practice as lay disciples. What we can do is, to 让正法久住, to prolong the life of the teachings of the Buddha, which is the Dharma, so precious. So we can still support the monastics, those who can really, let go and join the monastic. So we should, give our full support to them. And we should also, like what we are doing now, in Dharma circles, discuss Dharma, talk about Dharma, and talk about our practice and really put Dharma into our practice and benefit ourselves and share this wonderful teaching with as many as we can. Yeah, thank you, Sister Quek.
Brother and sisters, just one note. Because I have the hard copy. So there is a note on about jhana, meditative absorption. Yeah. The note says jhana, it means profound unification of the mind in meditation. The Buddha taught 8 distinct levels. Yeah, somewhere there. Profound unification of the mind in meditation, the Buddha taught 8 distinct levels. Yeah, that's the note that they added.
Actually, how do I go to the note? I also don't know.
It's okay because the notes, unlike the in Buddha's word, I can see it now. It's actually very brief, like 1-2 lines. So if next time, let's say Marcel is not here, we just read. Whoever have the hard copy can just read it out. The longest is like 5, 6, maybe about 6 lines. Yeah, I think can easily.
So probably
read it out.
At the bottom of the book
it's at the back
glossary, after the glossary.
Yeah, right at the end of the book. So
you might have to scroll down to get the note. If you want to. Yeah.
This is a short one, so it's okay. Just one observation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for
I think it's very important to know the history of Buddhism.
Yeah.
And we can learn from it. Because when I read this, I'm like, oh wow, so all these things happened already before, long before, and then today we're still talking, debating on the same thing, and we're still committing the same mistakes. As a community as a whole. So I think it's always good to remind ourselves of history. Yeah, and do not make the same mistake again.
Yeah. Yes. Sister Shomei.
Help me understand. So the original is supposed to be what they have in Sri Lanka, what came through Sri Lanka. And forest tradition predates Buddha's time in its origin. So what exactly, does anybody know what exactly were the differences in terms of the practice?
Buddha, before Buddha gained enlightenment, they are already ascetics, practicing and all that.
Yes.
They have 2 those that practice those meditative, those jhanas, those absorptive, up to all the way to 非想非非想, the neither perception nor non-perception, all these very deep jhanas, but they didn't get enlightenment. And those ascetic in the Thai forest, whereby they eat only 1 grain of rice per day, and they sort of like torture themselves, and taught that by suffering, by making suffering now you sort of like can after that gain enlightenment. But like Buddha have done all this, but the real thing that he gained enlightenment from is actually the dependent origination, because he keep finding, why do we have death? Because he thinks the greatest suffering actually, it boils down to all this, because we need to have old age, sickness, and death. This is a non-written. Every being is heading towards this. When we are born, then we will die. So he goes back the 12 links, basically, the dependent origination. So he traces all the way back. Why is there, birth? Then because there's existence, yo. Then why is there existence? There's all this clinging, attachment, the I, the ran zao and all that. And then all the way back to all our sixth sense base, the touch, the contact and all that. And all the way actually to ignorance, which is the wu ming. Yeah. So he said, we fail to see, and also why we fail to see the impermanence. And actually, because of the impermanence, we cling on to this self. And that's why he actually is the Four Noble Truths is inside here. So he see the origin of the suffering, and he sees that there is a way to eliminate this, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. So start from right view and under right thought. You have to sort of like purify our body, speech, and mind, and with all this mindfulness and everything. So to see realize the truth in this, why we are in this samsara. Yeah. So that is the difference, because the teachers that have jhanas and all that didn't see this truth. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, let me share a little bit. So, Sister Saikyang, I think you mentioned something about the self-torture bit, and you said something about Thai forest. It's not just in the Thai forest, I think.
No, it's
more
before
it's before that.
Before,
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's even during the time of the Buddha, before he became a Buddha, he was also practicing that. Yeah. So there was, but you're right. Like there was a tradition, or like there was such a practice among some of the contemplatives, some of the practitioners of the time. And yeah, then there are also some of them who are practicing jhanas, and in fact the Buddha learned under some of these teachers, right, to also master some of the higher stages of jhana. Yet he found out that their way of practice, or their path, did not lead to liberation, did not lead to nibbana. And so what Sister Saikyang said is right. So I think Sister Shomei was asking about like the differences between those traditions and the Buddha's practice. Is that your question?
Yeah, those two. That means between the ascetic practices, which is now more like the Thai forest tradition, and the Sri Lanka Southern Indian school Theravada, what are the key concepts that are missing in one or the other? Am I making sense?
Oh, you're asking more about the modern time
Sorry,
differences?
can I have
okay.
a word first? Sister Saikyang, can you do the closing for me? I have to leave now.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No worries.
So no, I'm saying that so we have Theravada as in practice in some of the Sri Lankan temples that we know of today, and the Thai forest tradition. What is if there is any difference? Then I'm sure there's difference. What are those key differences?
Oh, okay. So I think Sister Shomei is asking more about modern day differences rather than in the Buddha's time. So I think Sister Saikyang got it right. In the Buddha's time, those are the differences, right? So the ones who were practicing jhana, they were unable, or they were not using the jhanas to then investigate dependent origination, right? The cause of suffering and so on, how ignorance leads to craving, leads to rebirth, and so on. So that's one. And then, of course, there were those who were practicing self-mortification, and the Buddha clearly rejected this way of practice in his first sutta, right? He was talking about the middle path, and he rejected the extremes of sensual indulgence as well as self-mortification. So those are the key differences between the Buddha's way of practice and other traditions at the time. So I think Sister Saikyang was talking about dependent origination, and that's very key to the Buddha's framework of the Four Noble Truths, right? So that was his fundamental teaching he laid out in the first sutta, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So that's a good point. But now Sister Shomei is more asking about the historical evolution, right? Sri Lankan Buddhism today and Thai Buddhism today. Is that right? Okay. Wow. That's a different question. Yeah, Second, did you have any thoughts on that?
uh, I don't know how to answer this. um,
Um, I think it's probably needs some pondering. I was just asking something which somebody mentioned that, the pure one seems to be the Sri Lanka version, but I got a bit confused.
Okay, based on my I mean I really I think it's a very good question. So I'm just coming from my just observation. I don't really practice follow Sri Lanka or Thai tradition, but based on what I see today, it seems to me that when we talk about Thai forest tradition these days, we always refer back to Ajahn Chah, that forest tradition. And I think that's probably because he has propagated so far and wide to many disciples in the world and has spread and has flourished. And then that's my very observation. Really, there's no nothing written or nothing like recorded by scholars that is such a case. Then in Sri Lanka, like for example, we see a lot of Sri Lankan monks, like especially like Bante in Buddhist library. They don't really like say, oh, we do forest we do forest practice or something. But I'm no doubt they also go to the forest to practice. Yeah, it's just that to me, Sri Lankan, the tradition seems to follow very basic, very traditional, original, or rather you say the early Buddhism kind of practice. They still sticks to that, but they do not emphasize so much on forest tradition. That is what I observe of today. Yeah. So if you want to see Sri Lankan monk, they are there. They are in the temple, sitting down there. You can ask them things. You can pay respect to them. So yeah, that's the difference that I observe.
yeah, I think for Pante, yeah, they nowadays because I think in Singapore context or even in Sri Lanka, they don't do the Thai forest whereby they seek for elms. Yeah, I think the condition just doesn't happen that way. Even for the Mahayanas, the Dachen Sifu who stays now in the temple also don't beg for alms because they cook their own food, that kind. So you can see that there's all these changes that happen as Buddhism spreads to different country because of all this different culture, and then there's vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and yeah, some of the Bantes, they not vegetarian because Buddha he himself is not a vegetarian, because you seek for alms you cannot be choosy. So I remember this joke from Ajahn. He said in his alms bowl that, have you ever eaten rice with strawberry ice cream or blueberry ice cream inside, where everything is just inside and then you just have to eat? Why do you need to eat? The basic is just to fill your stomach. And yeah, that the Thai forest, I think they are stricter lah. And then they really keep to the no accepting of money. Yeah, they really don't. And I think they do a lot of meditation. Yeah, to look at our own mind. Yeah, that is where all the defilements starts. Yeah, so I think that's what I can say about these two different traditions.
Mm. Well, the biggest difference is the language lah. In the Thai forest tradition, they speak Thai. In the Sri Lankan tradition, they speak Sri Lankan or Sinhalese. Yeah, yeah. I would hesitate to kind of give broad differences in the sense that there are different monasteries in both Thailand and Sri Lanka, and different monasteries, different lineages have different points of emphasis. So, for example, even in the Thai forest tradition, you've got the Ajahn Chah's branch network of monasteries, network of different branches, right? But you've also got, for example, Ajahn Man, right? Ajahn Man, uh, his tradition or his lineage also a number of branches or a number of monasteries. So in Sri Lanka, you've also got different lineages, different monasteries. So my point is, different monasteries, different lineages, they have different points of emphasis, and it's not really a kind of comparison between like Sri Lanka and Thailand. Those are kind of very, very broad categories. You want to kind of go into more detail into like the differences between different monasteries. So to give a broad overview of different differences. So Sister Saika mentioned it, right? So like, for example, Vinaya keeping. So some monasteries are, you might say, more strict, like stricter in their keeping of the Vinaya rules or the Vinaya precepts, right? And then yeah, money, use of money, that's another factor. And then also the different allowable foods. For example, different allowable foods after the noon time or after the proper hour and so on. So those are some of the differences in terms of Vinaya. But there are also some differences in terms of like practice. Some monasteries are more meditation focused, like they spend a lot of time in meditation. So some monasteries are more like community, so they have a lot of time to do community work. So I know in some like monasteries in the Ajahn Chah lineage, they have a lot of work, like building work. They build stuff, and they do a lot of like um you might say manual labor, hands-on work, yeah, things like that. So you've got different kinds of emphasis, even like among different monasteries. So the differences are varied lah. There are a lot of like kind of differences. So that's kind of my broad answer. Mm, yeah, some monasteries are more focused on, say, for example, like more study based. So a lot more sutta, a lot more abhidhamma, perhaps. So those are the differences across monasteries in Myanmar, in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, and other countries as well. So yeah, that's my broad overview. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Brother Wick.
yeah,
Yeah, about the continuation of Buddha's teaching. So I know Bante, he's also conducting a lot of courses, yeah, so that you can teach the Dharma to more people. So they have all these postgraduate courses and yeah, all this to sustain Dharma in this 末法时代, we call it. Yeah.
yeah. Dhamma ending age.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, yeah. I have a few more points to share about what we've read earlier, if I may.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the point about different monasteries, I find it helpful because I think there is room for variety of emphasis in the Buddha's dispensation, right? In the Buddha's community. So different practitioners are inclined towards different practices that are helpful for their practice, for their progress, right? So some people find more study helpful, some people find more community helpful, some people find more meditation helpful, and so on. So it helps to have different types of monasteries, and people, different monks, nuns, or lay people. We could kind of see what kind of environment helps us progress, what kinds of meditation method, what kinds of community, what kinds of environment, what kinds of support and resources, and then we could see how we could evaluate our own practice and see what benefits us, right? So that's kind of the choices we have, and it helps to evaluate like our affinity, you might say, with the particular monastery and so on. So I think it's good actually that we have a variety of options and a variety of practices. We could see where that takes us. So that's the first point. Another point, I really like what Sister Saikyang said. That's such a beautiful saying. 行佛所行，才能悟佛所悟. That's so beautiful. That's such a good insight. We would have to walk the Buddha's path in order to realize what the Buddha realized. And it's so true, right? Like if we look to the Buddha and we want to know, okay, how did the Buddha become the Buddha? How did the Buddha gain his wisdom, cultivate his samadhi, cultivate his virtue, and so on? We would want to see the path he walked, and we would need to walk the path he walked in order to arrive at that destination, in order to arrive at level of cultivation. So that's a really good insight. I like that. I like that phrase. Yeah. And then I think someone was mentioning about, I think it was Sister Quake who mentioned about ordaining, and then I think it's very true what Sister Saikyang said. It's not just about ordination and lay life. It's more, the emphasis is more about whether or not you are ordained or a lay practitioner. You would want to practice the Dharma. You want to share the Dharma. So the emphasis is more on the practice and not necessarily merely on what, the status, so to speak, whether ordained or lay. So I really like Sister Saikan's answer, like whether we are lay practitioners or ordained practitioners, we ought to have the Dhamma as our guide, have the Dhamma as our emphasis, and we ought to practice it and share it and use it, right, to benefit ourselves and others. So I think that's the emphasis. So yeah, thank you for raising that, Sister Saikyam.
Oh, ordain is not the same, no?
Yeah. Sorry, maybe I just add on.
Yeah,
I
please.
mean, it's because of my own limitation. I'm not able to do ordination. But if you really, want to spend time, teaching the Dharma, the best way is still ordination, because in the monastic life, whatever you think about is about Dharma more all the time. Because as lay person, we open our eyes, we still have to mop the floor, clean the toilet. We still have to think about our daily necessities lah. So what that we worry about is really more about mundane life. But if you really want to practice and do more, you should ordain. I I still support Quack's
Like we want to enlighten,
yes. It is definitely a more better environment for cultivation and to gain enlightenment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not trying to say ordination is not good.
I
Ordination
know,
is
I know.
great. Yeah, of course, I value ordination, and I want people to have that option if they want to ordain, if they want to be
Yes.
very dedicated, very devoted in their practice, and they want a very good environment, supportive environment. Of course, ordain, right? But I'm not trying to. Yeah, of course, ordination is great. It's great. Yeah, I'm just saying the key point that Sister Saka mentioned is, even as lay practitioners, we shouldn't think that we are like, we as lay practitioners, we shouldn't think that, oh, I'm not ordained, so Dharma is not my focus. You know what I mean? We should have, like, even as a lay practitioner, Dharma ought to be my focus.
Yes,
Like, Dharma ought to be my guide. That's
yes.
that's the right attitude, the right mindset. Yeah. So of course, I'm not saying ordination is not good. Everyone should think about, okay, is ordination good for me? Is it a choice I want to make? Yeah. Just a note about sweeping the floor and cleaning the toilets. I think that's also something that monastics do. Just saying, monastics do that as well. Just saying.
Lay person must have part of it must have spiritual lah, and part of it is material. Part of it is yeah.
So definitely ordination is very good. It's a very conducive environment to the spiritual life, right? Think about meditation, think about studying. You have more time, you have more resources, and so on. Obviously, the dedication is available there in order to support. So definitely ordination is great. Yeah. I just want to caution, not necessarily any of us here, but in a general sense, some lay people might think, oh, I'm just a lay person. I don't need to be so serious, like so serious in my Dharma practice. That's something I want to caution against, because I think both lay and ordained disciples are disciples of the Buddha, are members of the Buddha's community, and we both the lay and the ordained community ought to really put in our effort to sustain and to prolong the Buddha sasana, 正法久住. Yeah.
对。
So that's kind of our duty lah.
Yeah.
I've got two more reflections very quickly. One is from both from the book reading we did earlier. One is when Ajahn Chah talked about, or when they talked about how the Thai forest tradition, sometimes the teachers emphasize that you don't get Dharma from books, so to speak. I think that's a very important point. Of course, books and learning and study are very helpful. They are like foundational in terms of our right understanding. But then if we are only, you don't get wisdom from books. Exactly, you don't get wisdom from books. If you're only kind of if you're only staying on the theoretical level, then that's not helpful. So I think this is a good point for us, all of us, as we begin the new year. Is a good reflection for all of us to think about not just studying, but also putting what we study, putting what we learn into practice, like into application. So that's one reflection I have. And the final reflection I have is about the Vinaya. So earlier in our discussion, we were discussing about how important it is to keep the Vinaya, and Sister Saikian was also sharing how uh, important it is for the tradition to maintain the Vinaya, so that the Dhamma and the Buddha Sasana could be preserved in the purity in purity, right? I recall this saying or this line from, I think, the first council of, how the Sangha came together, gathered to recite the discourses, and then uh, Venerable Mahakassapa was kind of the leader of that council, right? And then there's Venerable Upali, Venerable Ananda, and so on. And there's this line from that Sangha, that from that council, that really, really moves me. So it says that the Vinaya is the lifeblood of the Sasana. So it is this Vinaya, it is this uh, institution of the Sangha that will keep the Dhamma alive, right? It will keep the Sasana alive. And so it is very important for us to think about that, to think about supporting the Sangha, to think about keeping this Dhamma alive and keeping the Vinaya pure, right? So that's one good reflection that I was thinking about. So yeah, thank you
Thank
for
you.
listening. Yes.
Thank you, Brother Week. Oh, we had a good discussion today. And now there are only left 4 of us. Never mind. Let's do dedication. 回向，愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。Let's rise and pay respect to the Buddha. First prostration. Second prostration. And third prostration. Let me stop recording.